What have I done? Definitely bouncy alright though. This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Build a beautiful online presence with Squarespace. Ah yes, this is it. The tofu. You know, the one that somehow got me labeled as that O-Ring Tofu guy, and the tofu that the Glarsis man himself said was one of the best sounding he's heard. One of my builds from my early days when all I had was some hope, a dream, and a tofu. The original video now has over 300,000 views on it, and I thank you for that. And I still have it. It's happy and it's doing fine, and still sounds good. As you know, this thing is O-Ring mounted. The signature even and poppy sound actually comes from it being mounted between two soft silicone O-rings. No PE foam, no tape. It sounds good and it types fine. The O-rings do provide some cushioning and it doesn't feel as hard, but still, after all these soft gasket mounted keyboards I've been typing on, this does feel a bit hard and a bit outdated, so I needed to do something. That's right, I put it on a trampoline. It felt like a good idea at first, then I realized it was dumb. So I had this other brilliant idea. Why don't I put the trampoline inside the tofu? That's right, and that's where these come into play. Springs. Specifically, I use these. 5mm by 10mm tall COIL springs. And no, switch springs do not work here. So what does happen when you spring mount the tofu? This? No, this is a joke. I mean, unless you really want it to be like this, then you might as well just put it on a trampoline. Nope, this is a sneak preview of what's to come. But before we do that, a quick word from our sponsor. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform that helps you build a beautiful website. It offers all the tools you need for website building and hosting, including professionally designed templates that are automatically mobile optimized and various SEO tools to get your site noticed. I actually use squarespace.com for my own e-commerce business because it allows for seamless integration of a lot of different payment tools that makes my web store so much easier to run and manage. Head to squarespace.com for a free trial, or if you're already ready to launch, use the link squarespace.com/keyboard for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Please don't ask what I sell because it's so not keyboard related. Before we start, I wanted a cool name for this mod. If there's a Tempest mod and a Holy mod, why can't there be a keyboard mod? So let's call it that. First, you start with a TOFU65. For this mount, I'm only using a small piece of foam in the little crevice and not any more. You simply don't need it. Like the O-ring mount, we'll only be using select standoffs for spring and screw, so take note right here. The spring that I mentioned is a perfect fit for these tofu standoffs. They slip right on and essentially work like a coil spring in a car. As mentioned before, we are placing 5 springs in the lower case, the outer 4, and the center middle. This allows for an even distribution of weight and allows the plate and PCB to be isolated. Next, we're going to focus on this top screw right here next to the USB port. We need to determine how much clearance the USB slot will allow. We're going to start from a fully screwed in position, then back out the screw little by little until the top of the USB port touches the top of the opening. For me, it was about 4 full turns. Now that we know how much to loosen the screw, we'll prep the case for the spring mod. Since this is a floating mount style and the plate is actually smaller than the case, I need to create a tighter fit. For that, we'll be using this UHMWPE tape. Yes, the same UHMWPE that is in your beloved switch stems. It's super slick and also very tacky. Cut about 1-inch strips of this and apply it to each corner like this. This will ensure a nice and snug fit that allows for the plate to move up and down without banging around inside the case. It will also allow for smooth motion since the UHMWPE has very low coefficient of friction. Remember our plan to back out the screw to allow for up and down movement? Well, if you hold a compressed spring with a loose screw, eventually it'll fall out. So before we mount anything, we'll be using some of this. Some Permatex Thread Locker Blue. You can also use Loctite Blue because blue is removable. Don't use anything stronger. Just apply a tiny bit to the threads of the 4 outer standoffs that we'll be putting a screw into. Now place the 5 springs over the standoffs and place the PCB and plate assembly down gently onto the springs. Now you can screw down the 4 outer standoffs all the way, then back it out the number of times you have counted as the most optimal for your preference. Now, give it an hour or so and your thread locker should be hardened and your screw will be set nicely. So, what did we get out of all this work? Let's check it out. Yup, now your spring-mounted tofu is complete. It's surprisingly soft and bouncy without any hint of instability, so it feels good. What does it sound like? Honestly, I didn't think this mount would turn out this good. When I first thought of this, it was a shot in the dark, but man, it turned out so much nicer than expected. It actually feels nice and soft, but very lively at the same time. It has a nice and distinctive sound to it. I can't really explain it with words, but has more of an instrument type characteristic versus a dampened gasket sound. All in all, it was a fun and unique take on an old friend. I'm sure you're curious on how this thing sounds during typing, so I'll end the video with that. As usual, if you liked the video, please like and subscribe and I'll have more content for you in the future. And subscribe!